Welcome to G Movie. Today I will show you a crime, drama, action film from 2018 titled Death Wish. Spoilers ahead. Multiple radio stations are talking about the rising crime rate in Chicago. Things are worse than ever before and people are losing faith in the system. A police car with sirens blaring is speeding towards the hospital. One of the officers has been shot and is badly wounded. He is rushed into surgery with an emergency team already waiting, but his heart stops beating and the surgeon, Paul, pronounces him dead. He assures the other policeman that the death was not his fault. Paul is eating breakfast with his wife Lucy, while complaining about his watch running slow. As they talk, they hear a loud, excited scream coming from upstairs. Their daughter Jordan comes down and reveals that she got accepted to college in New York City, and they are happy for her. At Jordan's soccer match, they discuss her moving to college, but they are interrupted by one of the fathers, who is taking the game way too seriously. Paul politely asks him to shut the f*** up. He gets a little mad, but luckily the exchange doesn't escalate beyond words. After the game, the family is eating pizza in a restaurant with Paul's brother, Frank. They cheer with glasses of wine as Lucy is soon to complete her PhD. They talk about the fight that was narrowly avoided earlier, and Frank tells Jordan that Paul used to be known for getting scrappy when he was younger. After dinner, Paul agrees to lend Frank some money. They are waiting for their car to be returned, but the valet photographs the address on the family car's sat-nav after hearing they will be away that night. Paul and Lucy are getting ready to go out for Paul's birthday, dressed in fancy clothes. They kiss as they finish getting ready and Lucy gives Paul a watch as a birthday present. Paul gets a call from the hospital, and he has to go into work. Lucy and Jordan are disappointed that they need to cancel Paul's birthday dinner, but they agree to postpone it to another time. When Lucy and Jordan arrive back at home from being out for the evening, there is a suspicious van parked around a corner. They begin baking a birthday cake for Paul and Lucy asks Jordan to go upstairs and get her iPad from her bedroom. As Jordan is getting the iPad, she is also on the phone with her friend Sophie. There is an ominous black figure outside the kitchen window. Lucy gets a weird feeling and discovers an open window in the kitchen. She goes to close it and discovers muddy footprints on the floor. Realizing that someone is in the house, she yells for Jordan to come downstairs, but a robber dressed in black is hidden in her bathroom and captures Jordan as she starts going down. The three male robbers enter the kitchen and order Lucy to put her phone down. The leader of the group tells them that no one will get hurt if they cooperate, and Lucy is ordered to open the safe while Jordan is watched at gunpoint in the kitchen. After several attempts, Lucy finally opens the safe and the robber makes her take all of their belongings out and puts them into a bag. The thief downstairs starts to harass Jordan. When the other robber returns from the garage with a rope, they get into an argument and, seeing an opportunity, Jordan grabs a knife and cuts the guy's face, but the other guy disarms her and throws her on the ground. She tells Jordan to run, but the leader of the robbers has had enough and shoots his gun twice. Paul, who is in surgery, hears about two incoming female patients over the intercom. By the time he gets there, he is horrified to hear that his daughter is in intensive surgery and his wife has died. Paul lists the items stolen from their home to the detectives, Kevin Raines and Leonore Jackson. Frank shouts at the police officers for not taking the recent crimes in the area more seriously, but Paul tells him to calm down. The detectives try to assure Paul that they will catch whoever is responsible. Jordan is out of surgery but is in a coma, as Paul watches at her bedside. Lucy's father, Ben, speaks at her funeral and wonders how this senseless murder can be part of God's plan. He thanks Paul for bringing Lucy's body home and asks him how the police investigation is going. Paul tells him that neighbors saw three repairmen in a white van. Suddenly, Ben stops the car in the middle of the road and looks at something on the ground. He gets back into the car, and when they reach his property, there are two poachers with guns who immediately start running to their car. Ben gets out and starts shooting, but they escape. Lucy's father expresses his belief that you can't rely on the police, since they only arrive after a crime has taken place. He says that sometimes men need to take matters into their own hands and shoots the deer that the poachers injured, putting it out of its misery. Sometime later, Paul is driving and talking on the phone with Detective Raines and is disappointed to hear that they have no suspects yet. He shouts at a homeless man who is trying to clean his car window and is frustrated overall with the lack of progress by the police on the case. As Paul walks in his daughter's hospital room, he sees her friend Sophie reading an economics book to Jordan. She explains that maybe this way she won't fall behind, and Paul thanks her for being there. Later, he goes to therapy and talks about how he is unable to sleep in their bed, so he sleeps on the couch. He recalls his unhappy childhood riding trains by himself to avoid his father. He does the same now, just to think. Everything reminds him of the men who came and took his wife from him, and he expresses regret that he has failed to protect his family. The therapist assures him that healing is a process and it will take time. As days go by, Paul still hasn't received any updates on the case, so he goes to see Detective Raines in person. He questions Raines about the DNA samples, but they didn't match to anyone in the database. In Raines' office, Paul notices all of the open cases he is currently working on. Only a small portion of them have been solved. Raines assures him that sooner or later one of the three burglars will get picked up for something unrelated and sell out the rest for his own freedom. Paul wonders if offering a reward or hiring a private investigator would help, but Raines explains that offering money would only create multiple false leads and that a private investigator can't legally get involved in an ongoing murder case. All he can do is have faith. How did faith work out for them? Paul is walking in town at night when he notices two men harassing a young woman. He calls them out to leave her alone, but they beat him up instead. He goes home and watches an ad for a local firearms retailer. The next day, he goes to the gun shop and the shop assistant shows him all the different weapons they have. He inquires about the paperwork and she tells him that he doesn't have to worry about that. They will set him up with his application and after that he just needs to take a gun safety class, which no one has ever failed. Paul says he'll think about it. Sometime later, Paul is in the hospital attending to another gunshot victim when a gun falls out of the patient's pocket. He kicks it under the operating table and later grabs it. Over the coming days he watches gun tutorials and practices shooting. One day, Paul is called to the ICU and finds out Jordan has had a seizure. Her condition keeps worsening and it looks unlikely that she'll survive. He becomes enraged due to the criminals still being out there while his daughter is tied to a hospital bed. That night he takes the gun and starts walking through a rough area of Chicago. He sees two men trying to steal a woman's car. He calls them out but they just start shooting. As they try to drive off he shoots the driver and they crash. The other guy gets out of the car and starts blindly shooting, but Paul gets the jump on him and kills him. A woman in the window has filmed the whole thing. Paul runs from the scene, throws out his hoodie and gets home on a train. He bandages his injured arm and goes to sleep. Detectives Raines and Jackson take statements from the woman Paul saved and the woman who filmed it. Paul's face was not visible in the video, so the only thing they know is that it was a white guy in a hoodie. Raines watches the video and notices Paul injuring his hand due to not properly holding the gun. They tell the woman to keep the video confidential. I uploaded that hours ago. The next morning Paul sees the video of himself in the carjacking shootout. He is dubbed the Grim Reaper by the media. As he is driving to work he listens to a radio broadcast discussing whether he is a hero or not. A young boy is the victim of a shooting by a local criminal and dealer dubbed the Ice Cream Man. Paul checks the boy's chart in the hospital and notes his address. Afterwards, Paul puts on a hoodie and goes to confront the Ice Cream Man. He shoots him and dips, while the locals steal all of his ice cream. The detectives arrive at the scene and again the witness states that he saw a white man in a hoodie. Raines notices some kids reenacting the events and figures that it was probably the Grim Reaper again due to him being left-handed. Their superior is pissed about some vigilante going around shooting criminals, worried about others trying the same and asks how far they're at. They explain that so far, they know that he's left-handed and lacks basic weapon skills. Congratulations, you got it narrowed down to about 1 million suspects. Paul goes for another therapy session and the therapist tells him he looks a lot better and to keep doing whatever he's doing. Paul chuckles and tells her that he will. One day, Paul is operating on another gunshot victim and realizes that it's the valet. He also notices his old watch on his wrist. The valet dies on the operating table and Paul goes to the ambulance he was brought in and steals his phone. He unlocks it with the valet's finger and also takes back his watch. He goes through the phone and finds the picture of their address. He keeps digging and finds a picture of a liquor store, which is actually a front for selling stolen goods, and decides to go investigate. He picks up another hoodie from the hospital's laundry and goes to the liquor store. He makes up a story that the valet sent him, but the owner notices the hospital label on his hoodie and sneakily sends a text to another criminal, Fish, telling him to come over. He then reaches for a revolver, but Paul nails his hand and orders to show him his stuff. The owner takes him to a safe, where Paul finds all the valuables stolen from his house. Fish arrives and tries to shoot Paul but kills the owner instead. Paul uses the cameras to shoot Fish through the bar, and asks him who killed Lucy. Fish tells him it was a mechanic named Joe, and that his address is in his phone. As Paul picks the phone up, Fish kicks him to the ground and stands up, aiming his gun, but a bowling ball falls on his head and he dies. Paul then quickly grabs the tapes and leaves, but his ring falls on the ground. The next day Paul is visited by Raines and Jackson at the hospital. They show him a picture of Fish and also the ring, which Paul confirms is his. They tell him it's only a matter of time for the case to be solved, now that they know one of the burglars. Later, Paul goes to visit Joe. He knocks him out with a wrench and Joe wakes up tied under the car. Paul makes a cut through the strongest nerve in the body and prescribes him some brake fluid. Joe does not enjoy this very much, so he tells him everything he knows. His wife's killer is actually someone called Knox. Paul thanks Joe for his cooperation and puts him down. The detectives stop by the batting cage and talk to Frank because they believe he may know something about the Grim Reaper. Paul is in the hospital next to Jordan when he gets a call from Knox. He taunts Paul, saying he wants to tell him his wife's last words and asks to meet at a club in 30 minutes. Frank goes to Paul's home and lets himself in after no one answers the bell. He enters the basement where Paul has been keeping ammunition and realizes he is the Grim Reaper. Paul goes to the club and messages Knox saying he's here. Knox tells him to meet in the bathroom. Paul calls his cell, and when he kicks open the stall there's only a phone there. Knox appears from behind and starts shooting. Seeing that he is cornered, Paul shoots out the lights, crawls out and blends in with the crowd. The detectives get a call about the club shooting and go to the hospital where one of the victims claims he saw the shooter. They visit him and it turns out to be Knox. The detectives go to Paul's office but he isn't there. Paul goes home where Frank confronts him. Paul explains that he had to do it because no one else would. Their conversation is interrupted by the detectives. Frank opens the door and tells them Paul isn't there. They know he is but can't arrest him without proof. Paul receives a call from the hospital informing him that Jordan is awake. He rushes there and has to tell his daughter that her mother is dead. Next morning they get ready to go home, but when they enter the elevator, Knox joins them. He makes small talk with Jordan and when they leave Knox says he'll see them around. Paul makes a stop by the gun store. After eating dinner, Jordan gets ready for bed, but Paul tells her to get under the stairs and call 911 because he saw someone outside. Knox breaks in with 2 of his goons, but Paul quickly neutralizes both of them. He hears a noise in the basement and goes down, but Knox shoots him in the shoulder and tells him to sit down. Jordan comes out of the stairs and screams, which distracts Knox. Paul hits a button on his table and takes care of Knox. Police finally arrive and Paul tells Rains that he got all his injuries tonight, including the cut in his hand that's almost healed. Rains asks a couple more questions and Paul implies that he is done being a vigilante. Rains is satisfied by this and lets him off the hook. Sometime later, Paul drops Jordan off at college in New York City, where her friend Sophie is already waiting. As he is heading back to his car, Paul sees a man steal a bag off a bellhop's cart. He calls him out and points a finger gun at him. The end. Thank you for watching. Subscribe us for more videos.